Tuesday, January 19th, math lesson. Our objective today is I can determine fractions that are equivalent using fraction strips. So we're continuing with our fraction study this week, but today we're going to focus on equivalent fractions. Different fractions can name the same part of a whole. Fractions that name the same part of a whole are called equivalent fractions. We can use this tool called fraction strips to help us find equivalent fractions. So what I'm going to do is locate where 1/2 is on the fraction strips. I see 1/2 is right here where my cursor is, and I want to find different fraction strips that equal the same whole. So I know that 1/2 is half of one whole. So if I go down to my third strips here, I see that 1/3 is less than 1/2, so those are not equivalent. But if I move over here to 2/3, that's larger than 1/2. So it looks like all of the third fractions on the fraction wall are not going to be equivalent with 1/2. If I move down to 1/4 though, let's look at that. 1/4 is less than 1/2, so that does not work. But 2/4 stops about right here, exactly halfway between the one whole line. So I could say that 2/4 and 1/2 are equivalent. If we think about it in terms of food, if I say that I ate 2/4 of a cake, that's the same thing as saying that I ate 1/2 of a cake. If I look down at the fifth strips, 1/5 is less than 1/2, so those are not equivalent. 2/5 are also less than 1/2, so those are not equivalent. 3/5 is larger than 1/2, that's not equivalent, so it looks like all of the fractions in my 1/5 strip here, I don't think I'm going to have any equivalent fractions to 1/2 there. If I move down to the 6th, 1/6 is less than 1/2, let me keep going. 2/6 still less than 1/2. 3/6 though stops halfway in between the one whole mark. So 3/6 is also equivalent to 1/2. Again, in terms of food, if I say that I ate 3/6 of a cake, that's the same thing as saying that I ate 1/2 of a cake. Finally, if I go down below to my last fraction strip here with the eighths, 1/8 is less than 1/2. 2/8 is less than 1/2. 3/8 is still less than 1/2. But 4/8 again stops halfway in between my one whole, so 4/8 is also equivalent to 1/2. There are many fractions that are equivalent to 1/2. Let's try this next one, 2/3. So here's where my 2/3 strip stops. I see that that's more than 1/2. So 1/2 and 2/2, which is one whole, are not equivalent to 2/3. If I look down below at my fourths, 1/4 is less than 2/3, so that is not equivalent. 2/4 is less than 2/3, so that's not equivalent. 3/4 is greater than 2/3, so that's not equivalent. None of my fourth strips work for 2/3. 1/5 is less than 2/3. 2/5 is less than 2/3, so that doesn't work. 3/5 is less than 2/3. 4/5 is greater than 2/3. So it looks like none of the fractions on my fifth strip will be equivalent to 2/3 either. Let's go down to the sixth strips. 1/6 is less than 2/3, not equivalent. 2/6 still less than 2/3, not equivalent. 3/6 is less than 2/3, not equivalent. But 4/6 stops at the exact same point where 2/3 stops, comparing it to my one whole up top. So 4/6 and 2/3 are equivalent. If I were to say that I ate 4/6 of a cake, that's the same thing as saying that I ate 2/3 of a cake. Let's try 1/4. So this yellow one right here is my 1/4 strip, so I want to see what is equivalent to that. 1/2 is greater, so that does not work. Those are not equivalent. 1/3 is also greater, not equivalent. 1/5 is too small, but 2/5 is too large, so none of my fifth strips are going to work. 1/6 is too small, and again, 2/6 is too large, so none of my sixth strips work. But if I check down here at 1/8, let's see if I can find an equivalent fraction. 1/8 is too small, but 2/8 stops at the exact same point where 1/4 stops. So 1/4 and 2/8 are equivalent fractions. If you eat 2/8 of a cake, same thing as eating 1/4 of a cake. Both of these fractions represent the same part of my one whole. So let me pull up a preview of what your exit ticket will look like. The first question is definitions about equivalent fractions. So use the drop-down arrow and choose the correct term that goes in the blank. The next several questions use this fraction wall, so you will be able to use that as a tool. The instructions here say to drag and drop the fractions that are equivalent to 1/2. So it's possible there's more than one answer, but use these fraction strips to help you, and you can zoom in as well on your iPad screen. Number 3, true or false, 1/4 is equal to 3/5. Number 4 and 5 are also true and false questions. Use this fraction wall as a tool. And finally, number 6 says, color in a fraction that is equivalent to 2/6. So using the fraction strips, I'm either going to say that 1/3 is equivalent to 2/6, 2/3 is equivalent to 2/6, or 3/3. So you just click any of these sections to color them in. I will be on WebEx at 3 o'clock for any math assistance or help that you may need with this particular lesson. So I will see everybody at 3 o'clock. And if you need any help, that's what I'm here for. I will be back tomorrow with another math lesson.